I know this is going to be hard. What do I need to do to, what do I need to do to put things in place to ensure that like I take care of myself? How do I? And it's sad that it actually goes in that direction, because when I walk into a workplace, usually it's more, I find myself toning down my blackness or toning down my queerness or toning down different aspects of my identity just to make other people feel comfortable, but also as a protective mechanism, in the sense of like, I'm waiting to see who it is that I can actually trust. And we all do it. Consciously or unconsciously, we're all like, okay, I don't want to show too much of myself just in case, it's not taken well. And it's sad that we have to do that. And I only see that mainly in like marginalized groups, whether you're a woman, whether you're a person with disabilities, whether you're Black, whether you're queer. It's quite sad.
Hello, community. Today's guests are special ones. They are good friends of a dear friend, and when I heard about them, the only thing I could think about was I want to have a conversation with them on the podcast. Aru has 10 years of experience in the art sector, working as a poet, a writer, a workshop coordinator, and a dramaturg. Through their work, they create safer spaces to address topics and racial inequality within the workplaces, while tackling the impact such spaces can have on mental health within BIPOC communities, as well as talking about being Black and queer within the African BIPOC communities. As Black queer person, Aru has and still overcomes the daily barriers addressed to both Black and queer people. Yet, they create their table and fight the lack of diversity and inclusion at the workplace. Born to two Congolese parents, Aru was born in Belgium and raised in Botswana. They have moved back to Brussels, where they juggle between working as artists, a freelance workshop coordinator, and their studies. In this episode, we will hear about Aru's professional journey in the artistic field and the behind the scenes of navigating life around family, society, and employers. Hi, Aru, and very welcome.
Hi, Sophia. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I've been longing this conversation for a while, so I'm very happy to having you. I'm very happy to have you here. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a long journey to get to this point of us finally getting to have this interview. So I'm really honestly happy to have this conversation with you finally.
Yeah. I always like to start these conversations by asking guests to describe themselves as professionals, because I believe that we don't hear that much that from professionals from our community.
Mm-hmm.
So I believe it's important to ask people how they see themselves, how they describe themselves as professionals. What would you tell us?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I do think it is important to hear such words, especially in association to Blackness. I won't lie, it's been a very long development for myself, allowing myself to call myself a professional or to even see myself in that light. Because growing up in a very stereotypical way, of course, I associated professionalism with like the neat suit and ties and slick hair and the jobs that considered to be lawyers and like doctors. And here I took the route of an artist and growing up within like an African context, an African community, an African household where there was that fear that, going down the artistic route wasn't going to bring enough money and that it was going to bring a lot of struggles. It was difficult to sort of like layer off the projections from, external parties. So yeah, it took me a long time to associate myself with that word. And especially because, as you can see, I have dreadlocks.
Beautiful ones.
Thank you. So that also is not considered, professional in whichever working context, and that comes down to as well colorism and texturization of Afro textured hair. So it took me a very long time, but I can now say very proudly that I do consider myself a professional. I'm a poet. I'm a writer. I'm a freelancer, workshop coordinator. I do dramaturgy, and I actually studied interior architecture and design and graphics design. So it's it. I cannot I cannot call myself a professional in one specific thing. And I think that all these different aspects actually lead and build up to the identity that I have, and the identity that I'm still working towards as well. So yeah, it's hard to pick one word. I would say I'm a multidisciplinary professional, but yeah, it is. It's still. I mean, it's still a work in progress, as you can see. Like I am proudly calling myself a professional, but it depends on in what context as well that I work in, that I apply specific, added words to the word.
But it's, I understand, but I also find beautiful, actually, while you were talking. I was just like with a big smile because I'm just like, it's beautiful to see that evolution. And I could identify myself with a lot of the things that you said, especially when it comes to what professions are considered professions, right? What sectors you should work in order to be considered a professional.
Mm-hmm.
And also our physical aspect, right? The way we present ourselves physically. And when I said that I found your dreadlocks beautiful, I truly do. But I always, this fear that we always have in order to express our hair in the way that we want. I think everyone from our community can relate to, which I find such a pity because we are so talented
Yes,
with
we are.
our hair. We can do art with our hair, and this shouldn't be considered something bad. Should be celebrated and should be more used because it's art that we do with our
Mm-hmm.
hair, and I believe that few people can do that.
Yep.
So if we can't, why not celebrating it?
Yep.
So it's really good to see you with your dreadlocks. It's really good to talk to you about your professional career. That it has been so rich. I think that you have done so many great things, and I know that this is just a beginning. I know.
Thank you. I think it's also been really hard because professionalism is also linked to the level of success and exposure that you have, and especially within the artistic field. The amount of experience that you have. Yeah, so I think that's an aspect of life as an artist that is constantly challenging us, to redefine how we want to view ourselves and not have projections of the external world onto us. So yeah, so I'm totally with you with the fact that like we are artists with our hair, we're innovators, we're creators, and that should be something that is absolutely cherished and encouraged as well.
Yeah, so
Thank you
I'm
for
glad
that.
that you are doing it because I believe that this is also a way to encourage other people to do the same. So thank you. Besides being a multidisciplinary artist, you are also an artist that has lived in different countries. You have such a cultural background in that sense because you lived in Zimbabwe and in Botswana, as well as in Leeds in the UK, and now in Brussels in Belgium. All of that while finding your identity, which I find beautiful. So I was just like, can you tell us about that journey? Because I know that it seems a very basic question,
Mm.
but I wonder, is it a basic question when speaking about queerness in the Black community?
It's a very good question. It's definitely not a basic question. So yes, I grew up in Zimbabwe and in Botswana. And when it came to finding my identity, I wouldn't say it was a search straight away because I didn't even realize at first about my sexuality, and my queer identity came much, much later. So yeah, others actually saw it before I did. that I was a lesbian, and it was actually a girl in my year who unfortunately is not with us today. She made a remark to me in school one time. I can't remember what I did or what I said, but in Botswana they called me Ponfi. That's my Congolese name. I'm named after my aunt.
Hi,
And
Ponfi.
I so she made a remark to say, "Oh my God, Pampi, you're so gay." And my response was, "What's that?" Because I had no idea, about homosexuality. And even though I didn't know what she meant, I immediately felt ashamed just because of the way that she said it. I sensed that whatever she called me wasn't seen as a good thing. So I went home, I checked online. My reaction was like, oh my God, I am not. So this was when I was 14 years old, and I didn't even know that I had like internalized homophobia because there were no conversations around homosexuality. Yeah, and it was not something that I had encountered. And I'm recounting this story because it's important to note that at the time in Botswana there wasn't an established LGBTQI plus organization, and to meet anyone that like had your same lived experience was very underground. You had to know someone to know someone. This is essentially how I got to know my exes. But which was great, and it felt like a whole new world, and it felt quite validating. I came out when I was 17. Yeah, and it was really difficult to find people like me. And when I say people like me, I mean the queer community, not Black people. I mean Botswana. It's it's a country filled with like BIPOC persons, and so that for me wasn't a challenge of seeing representation that looked like me in my classrooms. It was it was a challenge hearing and seeing people that experience the same parcours of identifying as lesbian or gay or queer or bisexual, trans, um, yeah, or intersex, and that for me was quite difficult, and it was at such a young age. So when it came to the journey of finding my identity, it was very mixed, and especially as a Congolese person, I didn't grow up in Congo. I've never been to Congo. So there was also that dual sort of like shame of being like, okay, I am so proud to be Congolese. Like in the household, you felt it, and my parents, the food, the environment. But when I went outside of the safety of those four walls and met other Congolese people, there was so much shame. I mean, I don't speak Lingala. I don't know. There's a lot of certain cultural contexts that I don't know because I've never been to Congo. So it was really a a dual identity crisis, and that was quite difficult. I left Botswana when I was 19 to go to the UK, and it was there that I really got to understand and explore my sexuality. But then I also started questioning a lot my identity as a Black person because it was really in the UK that I realized, oh, okay, I'm Black. I didn't really think about it when I was in Botswana, because, of course, like my classmates, they were all Black or brown persons. But I did experience colorism in Botswana, and I didn't know that it was that. So it came actually quite late for me. I considered quite late to understand the context of racialization, yeah, towards my body, towards my skin color, towards myself. So it was really in the UK where my journey really started, where I started developing the language that associates with the journey that I went on. Yeah, and it wasn't easy. But I am grateful. I was in university while I was studying interior architecture. I was also working part time in my university as a student representative for Black and Brown folks. I used to go to conferences that would represent this demographic of students within universities all around the UK. There were different kinds of conferences as well. There was some for women's conference, there was some for LGBTQI plus conference, and it was, yeah, it really opened my eyes a lot, to allowing myself to constantly be curious with who I am, to constantly be curious about the development of who I want to be curious about the environment that I bring myself in. the associations that I have with people. It's allowed me to really shape my morals and my ethics, and how I want to be viewed, and how I want to be treated, because it wasn't easy being in in the UK. I had such a culture shock. First of all, the weather. I was used to 8 months of the year, sun, and then it was literally a 180. So that also actually in turn affected my mental health. I didn't even, and especially because in Botswana we never actually spoke about mental health. I didn't really understand what it was. If you were going through something, it was essentially, oh, you're tired, go to sleep, you'll be fine tomorrow, kind of thing. So in the UK, again, I really understood depression, anxiety. I was able to see words that I associated with, and it was a difficult journey to have conversations around that, because you, one, feel illegitimate, and two, it was a, how do I say, it was something that was seen as a Western. It was a Western thing, like we don't do this back home. So yeah, it was a journey.
And it was a lot of feelings were brought up to me while you were speaking. I could
Mm,
identify with a lot of the things that you said, even though I I was born and raised in Portugal. But you know, when you talk about being born to Congolese and never been in Congo, and but still you identified with the Congolese culture,
mm,
you lived it at home and you
mm,
liked it, and you were just like, this is my culture, of course. But then having the confrontation with Congolese that didn't know you,
mm,
telling you, oh no, you're not Congolese.
mm,
Why not? It's just, I think it's just like, why not? I feel the same with people from Guinea, with people from Cape Verde, when they tell me, yeah, but you are white. To me, they don't tell me you are not.
mm,
They just tell me you are white. And I'm just like, why? Because you don't speak Criollo. Just like, yeah, because no one speaks to me. No one taught me.
mm. Yeah.
you know, it's just like that. But uh, this is me now. But while growing up, I always felt hurt by those comments. And I always felt like, even though I want to belong, it's like they don't allow me to belong here. I didn't have the tools and the knowledge that I have nowadays. So hearing you speaking about your process of finding your identity and having those external reactions, it's something that I can truly identify. But then that's the thing. You then said that you are someone that is very curious about yourself, and I found it so beautiful, because I think that that curiosity is actually what can help us to empower ourselves, to
Mm,
find our inner strength, and to be able to love ourselves for who and what we are. So that curiosity, and it's funny because you said that you kind of realized how it is to be black in the Western world quite late. But at the same time, I find that while still in your 90s, beginning of your 20s, you were already very curious about yourself, not, because it's easy to try to allow or to be defined by what other people tell or
yeah.
say about you. But
Mm,
in your case, I feel like this kind of increased the curiosity about yourself, the curiosity of going deep and deep within you. And this is quite beautiful. So it's just like, yeah, but at the same time, this didn't stop Ahu to go and to do the inner work. And also, when you spoke about the concept about mental health within your community, I can also relate, because for me, I always heard that, like, oh, this is white people stuff. We don't have this
mm,
stuff.
mm.
We don't
Yeah.
we don't.
It's like, what is that?
Exactly. Exactly. So, but it's nice to see it, and I like the way how you put it, the curiosity of getting to know you. That's beautiful.
Thank you. I will say that, like, I think I have always been a curious person. Is just in the UK that it was done in a more liberal way. Growing up, my father did encourage us to, if we saw something was wrong or we felt that something was not okay, or if we wanted to learn something, he would encourage us to speak up. Um, and that's something that, like, I mean, with my siblings, we're very strong. We have very strong personalities. So when it comes to debates, these debates can go on for hours just because of, like, how we were raised, of really standing up for ourselves. So we have quite a it comes out very strongly. But I think the aspect of being curious is really allowing your inner child to just continue living. And that's something that as we grow older, we associate adulthood with not being a child anymore. And I think this is essentially like part of the problems that we have as adults. Um, of course, we need to take things seriously to a certain extent, but at the same time, part of the reasons why, we see now a lot of conversations online and in our communities and around the people that we love and even people that we don't know, talking about healing. Um, and they disconnect healing the adult to not being in touch with, your inner child. And I think that's something that, like, I never actually let myself get disconnected to. Um, Even more so now than before. Before, I didn't realize that I was doing that. I was always like, oh, but I want to do this and I want to do that. And, I was considered a rebel. Within my family, I had like a family that was just like, you're such a rebel. You're always doing something, that's not considered like part of the norm. And I'm just like, well, first of all, the norm was not constructed for us. It was not constructed for our bodies. It was not constructed for our minds. It's a limitation. And I'm able to articulate this now because of the reflection. But of course, when you're younger, when you're told not to do something, you're going to be like, but why? You know how there's always a story that, like, when you have the toddlers constantly asking you why and how it's annoying,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't have the answers to you don't have the answers to that. It's essentially like, as you grow up, keep asking yourself why. Be that annoying toddler,
Yeah,
that wants to have the answers to things and that wants to be able to resonate with you and the responses that you give. So yeah.
I completely agree. I completely agree. And again, it's inspiring, it's encouraging, and I hope that people that will be listening to this conversation will actually feel the need to go and to talk to their inner child, to get to know their inner child and say, okay, I will take you out.
Yeah.
I will take you out on a date.
I like that. I'll take you out. Yeah, no, it's really is essentially that. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And I was very curious about the way that you got to do so many things professionally speaking. How you're finding this episode so far? Did you know that Color at Work is available on all podcast platforms? It's also on Instagram, and recently we were challenged to be on TikTok. So you can follow us from your favorite podcast platform and find us on Instagram and TikTok through Color at Work Podcast. I can't wait to hear your comments and your feedback, and in this way, build a space for us. But I think I can understand a bit, but still, now that I heard you talking, but still, I would like you to tell us a bit about your work, because I'm
Mhm.
not sure that everyone is actually familiar with all the roles that you have taken so far. Because we hear those words, but I wonder, do
Mhm.
people really know what it is a workshop coordinator? Do people really know what it is to work as a dramaturg? We hear
Mhm.
it, but I'm not sure. So if you can tell us a bit, and also now I understand why for you it's so important to create these safer spaces at work. But how is it is your journey with that? Because I know that, again, conventionally speaking, it's
Mhm.
not a thing that we are used to.
No.
Even diversity and inclusion, talking about that, in the workspace, it's something quite recent.
I don't know if the diversity inclusion is something quite recent. I think it's a terminology that is quite recent, but I feel like um, our ancestors have been trying to do this for such a long time, just in different ways of seeing themselves represented and included and validated in the workspaces that they do. And I'm essentially just trying to honor that as well. Um, I did not see my parents struggling for years for me to not do anything about it as well. I mean, the reason I am who I am is also because of them. The fact that they never gave up, the fact that they know that, as a black child, I deserve softness in this life. And I want to extend that softness to other people that look like me, to other people that also navigate the harshness of society. So, yeah. So, in terms of the different professional roles that I do, it's all interlinked in some ways. And I would say some of these roles came out of necessity, whether it was personal or openly political, and others just came out of a sub desire. And I say sub desire because whether it came out of necessity in a personal political, there was an extension to that where I'm just like, okay, I actually want to explore this avenue further. And now I have the space to do so. So it came as an afterthought as well. Um, so maybe a little bit of context. I studied graphics design in college, and then I went on to study interior architecture. I also studied political science, and I did a master's in 3D design. So my journey has been quite long. And it was actually during my course in political science that I started wanting to apply a more creative approach to the way that I do things or the way things are done, because I struggled a lot when it came to studying. And I always had to basically draw things out to understand a certain topic, which took me a lot longer, obviously, to end up studying. But because I had a process of first reading the material and then writing it down and then having to draw it and then watching a video and then read, and it's like it was something that got me so frustrated, and it just got me thinking, like, the educational system, the way that we test our students, it doesn't consider the different learning styles or the limitations that it puts or that it brings onto us, from internal and external factors that play a role of how well you thrive within an educational setting. And while I was in the UK, I was studying interior architecture, and that's when I started a poetry and writing society with my friend Anna Jenkins. We were brought together. We didn't know each other at the time, but obviously we both had similar interests. So, alongside studying interior architecture and alongside working as a student representative, I was also doing work in poetry. And I think for me, that was also when I talked about curiosity. And I actually wrote this recently, where I talked about how writing and poetry, I will always give ode to that. I will always thank that. I will always refer back to that, because that is, the freedom of writing is what allowed me to be curious without judgment. And I wanted to be able to create spaces for people to have that. And going back to that story, the way that I first started writing, I was 16 years old. I was in Botswana, and I was in my social studies development class, and I actually fell asleep in class. It was a very long night, a very hard night, and it was during a test that a professor gave us. His name was Mr. Wilson, and I fell asleep halfway through the test. I was extremely exhausted. And I wasn't a student that usually did that. I was quite a quiet student. I listened, I never really got in trouble with my professors. So he woke me up and he sent me to his office. He gave me two A4 sheets of paper and a red pen, which is a very big deal back then, because, students and red pens were only given to teachers. So that for me was
Yeah.
quite exciting. But yeah, he told me, okay, for the rest of the class, just write. And he went back to class and left me in his office. But I was filled with so much rage from things that had happened, previously within that week, that I filled that A4 paper within 30 minutes. I just wrote and wrote and wrote for both the sides. And then when the bell rang, my professor came into his office. He looked at me and he goes, "Are you finished?" And I said, "Yes." And he put out his hand. I gave him my paper. He literally briefly looked at it, like literally a second. He scrunched it up and then he threw it in the bin. And I was
Wow.
just, and I was so mad. And I was just like, what? And he was just like, okay, go to your next class. And in my head, I'm thinking, right, so you make me write all this, for 30 minutes and you don't even take the time to read it. How disrespectful. And, 16-year-old me, I was like in my feelings. Um, and later on, like growing up, I realized this professor understood a need that I had to get things out. He respected my privacy, but he also gave me the space to do it. And I thought that was such a powerful moment when I realized it. Back then, as a kid, I was just like, "Oh my god, how dare you!" But now I realize like this was an educational setting that was safe enough for me to just come as I was. He understood that things were really hard for me. I couldn't finish the test. He allowed me to write things out, and so that is a story that I will forever carry with me, and that was the impact of what having that first moment of being able to just free write gave me. And I wanted to be able to create spaces that allow people to have that space to be safe enough to just free write and to just put their feelings on a piece of paper, because I didn't realize it actually, but for the rest of the day I didn't really think about what I wrote anymore because it didn't hold space in my head. And that for me was it, that is what I felt education should have been like. Where you have educators that take care of you in such a way. Of course, they're not your therapist. They're not there to they cannot give 100% in such a way all the time. But I think being able to implement such a caring strategies within the learning environment was very, very important. So that was my journey into writing and poetry. So to connect it to what I do now, I'm a poet and I give poetry workshops as well. And that's also what led me into dramaturgy, which is essentially helping and assisting and researching on playwrights by, performers. And so, like, say, for example, if you have a play that's written about, I don't know, the history of something as a dramaturg, you research that and you find the best way or the more, what's the word, appropriate way to bring that history into context into the performance with the artist. And you help them find a way to connect to that research, for it to come out in the performances as well. And you create a space for me, the way I see it and the way that I've adapted it to my work is like you create a space enough for the artist to be vulnerable enough to question what this work means to them, and how they want to express that within themselves. So there's also that aspect. And with the workshop coordination that I do, so I do workshops on safer spaces, with a focus on racial inclusion, gender, sexuality. And that essentially came when I was an artist here in Brussels, like when I was first starting up as an artist, and I was also a student, and I was being invited to different cultural sectors, cultural institutions, sorry, to perform. And that was also when I was starting to feel a bit more confident to essentially say, like, okay, I'm an artist, my name is so and so, and I identify as non binary. Um, and I'm someone that struggles a lot with anxiety. So when it came to actually going, sur place, how do you say it? Like in on site, in the institutions to actually start performing, uh, there were so many instances where either my biography written on text was wrong, even if like I would have sent it to them. There were so many instances where how you're welcomed into the space was just very confrontational in a very negative way, and it just got me so frustrated in thinking like, okay, well, like I don't understand why institutions who are inviting you into spaces cannot just hold space for you in such a caring way. You're inviting us to do a service, to bring entertainment to your organization, and the least you can do is like show us the respect back. So yeah, I started like slowly wanting to talk about this and the problems that this brings towards artists, because then a lot of expectation or the responsibility actually is put on the artist to do the correction or to silence ourselves to ensure that, we don't do anything wrong in case the organization doesn't want to hire us again and you're seen as a problematic artist. And, the list is long. But also as someone who struggles and suffers with anxiety, walking into spaces like people that know me know I'm the person that will sit either at the back of the room and at the corner or at the end of the chair so that I can escape as fast as possible. And having studied interior architecture, I always would analyze and observe the internal, the internal spatial structures to see how was a space set up to ensure that the artist felt comfortable and that they could also connect with the audiences. And yes, so this is essentially how my work on safer spaces came up, is like just trying to understand like how can we create an environment physically but also mentally for artists. And it's very specific to artists how we can navigate in a way where we feel comfortable enough to express and to perform and to connect with ourselves and with the public. Yeah, so that's on my workshop coordination. So slowly but surely, it grew into a much bigger role of now, because I worked also within theater, within the cultural sector, and working not just as an artist in front of the scene now, but also being within the actual institutions, working as an actual employer, and having to give a service to the artist. I got to see the other side of things, and I got to see how artists were treated, and I got to see, but also how a lot of pressure was put onto myself and my colleagues to have a certain image put out there, or to fit into the boxes, or the little check boxes that were needed and required by institutions, or people higher up. And that for me, I felt was quite frustrating. And and again, that's where I also started like working more closely with artists to help them learn how to navigate working within the cultural sector. Um, so yeah, it sounds like a lot. I do a lot of different things. It's not just one thing. Currently, I'm working as a researcher though. I work at Piano Fabrique, which is a cultural center here in Brussels, in Saint-Gilles. And I'm working with 6 other co-researchers on creating and designing a sustainable economic business model for artists, which is, quite a big work. And I feel very honored to be part of this project. And essentially, it was a research project that was inspired by Festival System D, which is a festival that came out, that was founded by Samira, who was my colleague, an amazing person and very inspirational. And she works with a lot of young artists that are mainly within the film sector, where she tries to create opportunities for young artists, the invisibilized artists that have not had the educational background of creating films and that want to go into that direction. And essentially, throughout the year, she gives different opportunities of workshops, of like guiding, of being a support in so many different contexts. And by the end of it, their work is actually shown in Festival System Day, which is it's just absolutely amazing. And like the festival is collaborated with a cultural institution that the invisibilized artists would never have even thought that they would be, they would see themselves in. So it's to also be able to break that barrier and the perception of like, who do these spaces belong to, and how do we ensure that like these artists do and can see themselves within these spaces, they can see themselves making it. Because if they don't see themselves in such spaces, it becomes very hard to aspire to do more and to go further. And especially with the artist status that there is here, it doesn't give a lot of opportunities. It gives a lot of limitations on like what you can do financially. So yeah, this as a researcher, we're now working on how can we create a sustainable economic business model for artists where they don't have to be struggling so much to do the work that they love to do, and that this work is validated. And especially, like, as you can see, I have so many disciplines, and these artists do too. But like, how do you validate these disciplines? How do you talk about the fact that like each of these disciplines allows them to be who they are, and as culture institutions you're inviting them to the space but wanting them to be a certain, one or the other, and cannot actually use the multifaceted talents that they have to create the pieces that they do. So yeah, I hope that made sense.
It did. And I know that the question itself was quite complex, and you gave us here lots of concepts, and at least to myself, you helped me to deconstruct a lot of things. So first of all, thank you for sharing your experience with your professor, because I think, like, at first hearing you talking when you said what he did to your paper, I was just like, what? But then I was just like, okay, he's teaching her how to journal. And the importance of this, at least for myself, for instance, I've always did it because I never knew how. I believe that I never knew how to express verbally my emotions. But as soon as I would start writing, everything would come out and I would feel good again. I would feel light, you know?
Mm,
So I really value what he did, and I value not only the fact that you shared that with us, that I hope some teachers can actually hear that and try to adapt this type of action, I would say, to their students, but also the fact that you also try to put that into your work. You pass that teaching to other people, and it's something that you've been doing throughout your work. Is always that lesson of uh, I went through this discomfort. It was very bad, so let me make sure that other artists won't go through the same. Let me do something that ensure that at least these people won't go through the same. And this is beautiful. And then you started to deconstruct stuff in my mind, because in Brussels, I've always seen a lot of diversity, cultural diversity, which for sure made me think that into the artistic world that I find that is very liberating, very inclusive, and diverse. I thought that these problems that you just mentioned didn't happen. So
mm,
to me, it was kind of, I had that question. To be honest, I had that question.
mm.
I would like to ask you that, but but the way you put it, I'm just like, oh, okay, okay. So it's quite interesting to see, and it's quite challenging as well, because that's the thing. I The artistic world is already, it's also a world of elites, you know,
Mhm,
and even to get in, you need to have a certain type of educational background that is quite expensive, let's be honest, that
mhm,
allows you to get to certain spaces into the working world, or the artistic working world. So the work that you and the colleagues that you've met so far are doing, it's really inclusive. I think it's really looking to that diversity and say, how will we be able to open the doors to you and opening safe doors to you into this world. So I find it beautiful. And thank you for sharing. And I really hope that people that are listening to this get more curious about the work that you are doing and try to get in contact with you to learn and to see how they can do similar things that you are doing in the countries that they are listening this conversation from. I really hope so. But
thank
and
you.
also, thank you for sharing. Thank you, because to me it's been quite enriching, and it's already making me think a lot, because that's the thing. I had a completely different viewpoint on that. So thank you. But within all these challenges that you have faced so far, what has really motivated you to not give up? Because I know that you are just sharing with us a small piece of the story. I know that because I I I got to know your work through a dear friend that is a former colleague of yours,
Yeah.
and she told me that your journey, at least the things that she could see, were not easy. Was not easy, and I know that you went through a lot of things in the workplace, and now you are kind of enforcing that by saying that you are making sure that people don't go through the same things that you were. So, going through so much at the workplace, what has motivated you to not give up and to keep facing those challenges and turning things around? What is your secret, woman?
I wish there was a secret. Um, uh, but there isn't. And I think that's a very interesting question to ask in terms of like what has motivated me. If I'm going to be completely honest, it's very hard to keep motivation. There's been so many days where I'm just like, I just want to give up. I really don't care anymore. I just, like let myself be in the situation. I don't care. But in all honesty, like it's not motivation, it's the fact that I don't have the choice to give up. You're put in a position in society, but also within the workplace where you have to continue doing what you're doing and you don't get the space or the grace to just breathe or to just feel the emotions that you feel when you're going through something that's quite discriminatory. Um, because if you show your anger, you're seen as the angry black person. If you show your
Yeah,
sadness, then that's taking up too much space in the workplace. Or if you show that you're super happy, then there's the expectation of being like, oh, you're the fun person, like entertain me kind of thing. Like, and I'm speaking in a very general sense. And a lot of people, I don't think, who are not black or people of color will not understand the emotional and the invisible labor that is put on our bodies. So it's like, yeah, it's not a question of like what motivated me. It's the question of like what, um, like why do I have to keep doing this? Like why is the responsibility not put on the workspaces to actually create an environment where I don't have to keep struggling at this, I don't have to keep bringing up these questions, I don't have to keep fighting to be heard or to be seen or to feel a sense of value. Um, yeah, just motivation is such a big word. I speak about this with my sister, where we just rant at how exhausted we are of constantly having to find different ways to solutions that shouldn't even be a problem. We shouldn't even have to deal with certain things, and it's the extra layer of the fact that like not only are we black, but we're also we're international. We're yeah. I say international because for me it's like, yeah, I've traveled. I'm from here, but I'm not from here. That's a whole nother conversation. Um, but like there's this external perspective of having lived in different spaces where you feel the different layers of policies that prevent you from just living a soft a soft life. I'm going to keep referring to that because this year this is what it's about for me. I would like a soft life. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but I would like a life where I don't have to fight anymore. um, I don't have to fight this hard. um, but yeah, in regards to the motivation, I don't think I was given the choice to not continue the work that I do, especially when you're surrounded by like everyday subtle microaggressions that like end up adding up and adding up and adding up, and to the point where your shoulders just can't take it anymore. You feel obliged to have to continue. You feel obliged to have to do the work. You feel obliged to have to support those that maybe don't realize that they're going through discrimination, don't realize that they're going through oppressive structures, or you want to also be there for those that maybe cannot speak for themselves and that would that want to learn, but that make it very difficult. Um, and I mean, there have been moments where like I do speak up, and it has put me in this category of where I'm seen as like, oh, watch out for this one, or oh, this one is problematic, or oh, this one's just very angry. Why can't you just, be happy or be okay? Why can't you just spend one day not complaining as they see it? Um, so yeah, I'm not sure if that answers your question about staying motivated.
I
Um,
believe it
and
does.
I mean, it's not to say that I don't get motivated. There are moments where I'm just like, oh, I I see things and I'm just like, I want to do this. I want to be able to help. I want to, and that I think it's knowing that like I have hope that things can be better. Um, and I think that's where the slight motivation comes in. But like majority of the time, is the fact that like no, there's no space to choose whether you can or cannot opt out of social justice work.
Your
Um,
answer brought me like bitter sweet feelings in the sense that yeah, I understand what you're saying, and it's quite it's bad. I find it bad that you still have to fight this fight, but at the same time, I'm just like, I'm so glad that you are doing it, because you're doing it. You are inspiring me just by listening to you. I'm just inspired, so I can really imagine how it is to work with someone like you, to see someone like you in the workplace that is not only so strong about it, but that really can be so sensitive, because I don't see that as, oh, you are always, but that's the thing. I'm a black woman, so that's why also I imagine. But I think that if I wasn't a black woman, I would just see it as an opportunity to really educate myself, and to
mm,
gain an awareness that, okay, I might not had that before, but right now I'm just like, I'm having the opportunity to improve my awareness and to be able to become more empathic toward others. So I think it's very inspiring. So thank you. Thank you for that. Even though the bitter sweetness of the whole thing. but but yeah. And I have to say, this has been deep. This has been inspiring, and I'm very grateful. And I would stay here and talk to you for hours, to be honest. I know you have things to do, but to be quite honest, I wouldn't let you go if I could. But yeah, but time is time is up in a way. But before letting you go, I'm curious, what truths up today you feel that you weren't told to you about the workplace, with the experience you have, with the awareness you already have.
what truths was I not told about the workplace? Huh, that's a difficult one. I don't think when we go into a workplace that people are essentially going to tell you the truth about it. I and this is just sort of a reality that I've accepted, so that I reduce the impact that I would have of myself. It doesn't mean that I don't have hope, that I would walk into a workplace that, essentially meets my basic needs of safety and care and enjoyment as well. When you navigate the world as a black body, or a marginalized body, just to speak in general, you already teach yourself not to expect too much from certain environments. So instead of like searching for the truth, we tend to look for like the risk factors. Like, okay, what is this environment going to? How is this environment going to impact me? How can I protect myself? Or what strategies or structures can I put in place to ensure that like I don't burn myself out, or that I don't feel exhausted from so many different things. And yeah, I'm trying to think of like the different workspaces that I've been in and being like, okay, what did they not tell me? Or like, no, it's been more like, okay, I know this is going to be hard. What do I need to do to, what do I need to do to put things in place to ensure that like I take care of myself? How do I? And it's sad that it actually goes in that direction, because when I walk into a workplace, usually it's more, I find myself toning down my blackness, or toning down my queerness, or toning down different aspects of my identity just to make other people feel comfortable, but also as a protective mechanism, in the sense of like, I'm waiting to see who it is that I can actually trust. Um, and we all do it. Consciously or unconsciously, we're all like, okay, I don't want to show too much of myself just in case, it's not taken well. And it's sad that we have to do that. And I only see that mainly in like marginalized groups. Whether you're a woman, whether you're a person with disabilities, whether you're black, whether you're queer, it's quite sad. I think I'm not sure if that fully answers your question, but like in terms of like the truth of the workplace, we're never going to be told entirely, the truth, unless there's someone that has very good ethical and moral values, which I think in each of us we should constantly be working towards. Even me, even though I do the work on, safer spaces, I do poetry, I do so many different things, and especially in research. And um, a lot of the times when we're doing research, people think that we're researching just, and I've said this before about like, the society and the systems around us, when essentially we're researching about ourselves. We are researching, how do these systems show up in ourselves? How are we projecting? How are we perpetuating? How are we recycling, oppressive and discriminatory ways? And it's essentially that. So when you walk into a workplace, you're hoping you won't be that person that perpetuates or that recycles these kind of things. You want to show the best of yourself, and it's about finding an environment that allows you to um, work and practice with care, to deconstruct and dismantle these very oppressive ways of navigating. Um,
I don't think so. And I don't think there was a right or wrong answer.
mm,
I enjoyed it. And thank you for that. And I believe that after this, after all the answers that you gave, people will become very curious about you. And for those that don't know you already and want to, how and where can they find you? Because imagine, I believe that people will, especially young people, they will want to, I believe that they will get more interested to know how they can do similar things that you do. And I know that you are a great advisor. I know that you are someone that is very patient and then can really advise people. So, how can these people get in touch with you?
through my Instagram. It's the in thing these days, social media.
Yeah.
So yeah, my Instagram is I mean, Aru Lee, so ARU underscore LEE underscore. And there you will find my link tree, which also has my email address. I do not have a website yet, and I'm saying this out loud to hold myself accountable to ensure that I actually have a website with the work that I do, so that it's more clear, because I am aware that I probably went into so many different avenues of the things that I do, and maybe it's still not as clear to people. But it's even something for myself. My brother even said this, like, I don't know how to say, or, I don't know what to say to people when they're like, oh, what does Aurélie do? And it's like, well, I know it's something with art and artists. And I'm just like, you're not wrong. So, so yes. But yeah, you can find me on Instagram. And it's, thank you, first of all, for holding space. It's very rare to be able to have these spaces and share, what we share amongst each other as Black people. And I think it felt good. So thank you. And I appreciate you saying that you hope people are going to be curious about me and want to contact me, but I also do hope that it does encourage people to be curious about themselves. And the reason I say curious instead of to just like, oh, you need to be more self aware, you need to be more this and that, like those can be quite heavy words and put a lot of pressure, especially when you don't know where to start. So curiosity gives you that space to be able to be like, oh, I don't know this, but I want to, and I want to make the time for it, and I'm going to come in gently with myself, and it's a softer way of learning about yourself and how you want to navigate, but also to ensure that you actually do the work, and I think we're going to constantly have to keep doing the work, and I hope that we can do it in a way where it creates community, creates care. We abolish all forms of like oppressive systems, and we work towards and we work towards something that is more constructive and more sustainable, for us to be able to live a softer life. So yeah, thank you very, very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate having this conversation with you. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you. Just sending little claps to you, little hearts.
To you too. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Color at Work. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe, rate it, and leave a review. Until next time.